Trump is seething. Across the world, cameras capture a rare gathering in China, but one face is missing. His. No seat, no influence, no invitation. This is the same man who once flaunted his friendship with Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un, insisting he could cut a deal with a single phone call. Today, that image of power has collapsed. The handshakes are gone, the doors are shut, and foreign leaders look less interested in appeasing Washington than in moving past it. The message hit hardest after the recent SCO summit. Instead of returning home, Putin and Kim traveled straight to Beijing to stand beside Xi. It wasn't chance. It was choreography. A calculated show of unity directed at America. Trump watched it unfold and, in frustration, accused them of conspiring against the United States. Years of sanctions, tariffs, and America first have left their mark, but not the way Washington expected. Instead of submission, rivals are drawing one conclusion. The U.S. is no longer a reliable partner. They are mapping out a future that deliberately excludes it. So the real question is this: are we witnessing the moment when U.S. influence finally slips away? As China, Russia, and North Korea lock arms, what will it mean for ordinary Americans, their jobs, their security, their place in the world? Before we break it all down, make sure to subscribe and join the discussion. Because the shifts happening now could reshape power in ways unseen for generations. The parade in Beijing wasn't just ceremony. It was a statement. This was no ordinary march of soldiers and flags. It was a lineup of America's toughest rivals standing shoulder to shoulder, presenting themselves not as isolated states, but as a coordinated front. China seized the spotlight to showcase cutting-edge weapons, nuclear-armed submarines, mobile missile launchers, swarms of drones, and endless armored columns. Every unit moved with mechanical precision, hammering home the point that Beijing no longer plays the role of a challenger. It's positioning itself as an equal power, capable of confronting the United States head-on. What drew the sharpest attention were the hypersonic missiles, weapons designed to outrun and overwhelm existing U.S. defenses. For Washington's military planners, this isn't speculation. It's a scenario that keeps them awake at night. Entire carrier strike groups, worth tens of billions, could be rendered obsolete in minutes. U.S. bases stretching from Guam to South Korea suddenly look vulnerable in ways not seen before. But the real weight of the parade wasn't the hardware on display. It was the message behind it. Asia's security balance is shifting, and America's guarantees to allies like Japan and the Philippines now come with far higher risks. The world saw not just weapons, but a reminder that Washington's era of unquestioned dominance in the Pacific is fading fast. What unsettles Washington most isn't only China's rise. It's the birth of a new economic bloc that seems immune to U.S. pressure. Step by step, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are wiring themselves into what analysts have started calling CRINK. This isn't a loose partnership anymore. It's a parallel system designed to outlast and outmaneuver Western sanctions. Look at North Korea. On paper, the sanctions regime should have collapsed the country years ago. Fuel imports capped, banking channels frozen, trade routes blocked. Yet Pyongyang still stands. Because Beijing makes sure it does. More than 98% of North Korea's official trade now flows through China. In 2023, that lifeline was worth over $2 billion, keeping Kim's regime stocked with food, fuel, and parts. Without it, the economy would collapse in weeks. With it, survival is guaranteed. Russia is another pillar. After the invasion of Ukraine, the West unleashed its maximum sanctions. Predictions of collapse filled Western reports. Double-digit recessions, job losses, a worthless ruble. But reality flipped. Military spending and energy exports kept growth alive. 3.6% in 2023. Slower but still positive 2 years later. Inflation is falling and the ruble has surged while Washington drowns in more than $37 trillion of debt. These survival stories aren't separate. They're interconnected. Russia sells oil to China, often above Western price caps, using a shadow fleet of tankers. China buys that energy in yuan, not dollars, locking in supply while cutting Washington out of the loop. North Korea sends rockets and even fighters to Russia in exchange for cash and advanced systems. Iran ships drones to Moscow, and in return gains Russian tech in Chinese markets. And projects like the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, set to pump 50 billion cubic meters of gas annually into China, cement the ties for decades ahead. This is what keeps Washington up at night. Every sanction meant to isolate has instead tightened the crink network. Every attempt to weaken one member has pulled them closer together. The U.S. once used the dollar and global markets as weapons, but now those tools are losing bite. The reality is simple. America's rivals are building an alternative order, one where Washington's reach doesn't apply. As Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang tighten their cooperation, the ripple effects are landing hardest in the United States. Trump's tariffs, once sold as a weapon to weaken China, have instead boomeranged. American manufacturers are paying more for steel, electronics, and raw materials. Consumers face higher prices at the checkout line. And U.S. farmers, once shipping soybeans and pork by the millions of tons to Chinese buyers, now watch those markets shrink as Beijing sources food elsewhere. What was pitched as protection has turned into pressure, leaving entire industries struggling to stay competitive. Meanwhile, China isn't retreating, it's advancing. Where Washington is severing trade links, Beijing is forging new ones. Its partnerships with Russia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America are redrawing the global trade map. The clearest sign is energy. The once hypothetical Russia-China gas pipeline is now moving toward reality, set to send 50 billion cubic meters of gas annually across Siberia into Chinese factories. For Moscow, it guarantees decades of sales even under sanctions. For Beijing, it secures reliable, cheap fuel, while the US and Europe look on from the sidelines. But China's strategy stretches beyond energy. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, it is embedding itself in regions long seen as America's backyard. Ports in Africa, highways across South Asia, railways in Latin America. These projects aren't one-off investments, they are permanent anchors. Unlike Western aid that often demands reforms, China offers deals without political lectures, a trade many leaders are eager to make. The result is cumulative and unmistakable. Each pipeline, port, and railway tightens Beijing's grip on global commerce. Every tariff Washington imposes only drives countries further into China's orbit. Far from isolating Beijing, U.S. policy is accelerating the very outcome it fears most: an alternative global system where America has little influence and even less leverage. To keep its foothold in Asia, Washington is pouring money into the military at an unsustainable pace. Billions are spent on carriers, stealth jets, and missile shields, yet each new Chinese weapons rollout resets the equation. The U.S. finds itself trapped in a cycle, spending more while feeling less secure. The math is brutal. A single U.S. carrier strike group costs tens of billions of dollars to build and maintain. A hypersonic missile built to destroy it? Just a fraction of that price. One missile, one strike, and years of American investment could be wiped out. Beijing is forcing Washington to play defense at a discount. And in that trade, China holds the upper hand. But the imbalance doesn't stop at sea. Every extra dollar funneled into overseas bases and weapons programs is a dollar not spent on America's own roads, schools, or hospitals. Bridges crumble, classrooms struggle, healthcare costs soar, while tax money is shipped abroad to sustain a military posture that looks less effective by the year. It's a choice between debt and decline, and neither option strengthens Washington's hand. Trump's recent tirade, accusing Xi, Putin, and Kim of plotting against America, revealed more than anger. It betrayed a sense of insecurity. For a man who once promised he alone could strike deals, this was an admission that those deals are no longer on the table. Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang don't need U.S. mediation. They are cutting their own agreements, building their own alliances, and openly sidelining Washington. That parade in Beijing was more than spectacle. It was a warning. The center of gravity is shifting. For ordinary Americans, the fallout won't be abstract. Tariffs mean higher grocery bills. Swelling defense budgets mean heavier debt and fewer public services. Respect once assumed abroad is sliding toward Beijing. And most concerning of all, the U.S. military position in Asia now looks fragile. Its carriers and bases exposed in ways that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. The U.S. can protest, threaten, or condemn, but the trajectory is clear. China is setting the pace, forging alliances, and reshaping the rules. America is overspending, overstretched, and increasingly on the sidelines. So the question remains, how long can Washington afford to play this losing game before the balance of power tips for good?